70s, late 70s, early 80s. And when it collapsed in Skyline, they actually drove it to a little street in Bailey's Crossroads and dumped it off the side of the road into a creek. Covered up an old sewer line for the county, put about 30 feet of concrete fill on top of it, just trash. So you look at it, you're like, man, that'd be a great place for some townhouses. But the only way to get there is to mitigate the bad soils, the way the site was built originally. So you spend a lot of time in your feasibility figuring out how you're going to fix it. Well, we decided to fix it with dynamic compaction, which is a fancy name for putting a crane out there with a 20-ton weight. They put it in the air and they drop it over and over and over through the site. Dynamic compaction, we pressed everything down, and we bridge over that with good material, with stone and with matting, and we build houses and roads on top of it. It's taking what's left and making it usable. There is a huge cost to doing that. So when you're trying to figure out how you're going to maintain your position in Fairfax County, Arlington County, Alexandria, our companies, as we mentioned earlier, our 50th year of business, most of those years have involved being in Fairfax County. That's kind of who we are culturally. So in order for us to stay there, we are developing what's left. And that's one of them. So you understand that component in your feasibility, and then when you actually start the site, you figure out if you're right or not. And our method of doing that is to have an estimator that actually works with our feasibility, works with our land group in feasibility, goes into our engineering group, and then goes into our development group, and it processes it all the way through. So we've got one guy that's responsible for that development cost all the way through the process. Brian and I actually call him the angel of death because he looks at our project some days and says, no, we can't do this. Or he'll give us the development cost because he knows he's going to be responsible all the way through, that he's not going to hedge like we would hedge because eventually our hands are off and it goes on to other people. So, Mike carries it through the process and then he's responsible for contracting. But once we close, at that period of time of entitlements, we've had an engineering department that's been managing the site plan process. So they work with the counties, they do use the civil engineers and geotechnical engineers, they get everything approved all the way through the process. We close, now it's time to put a shovel in the ground. We take everything that we've done up to that point and we put it out to the market. We find a development contractor. There's a couple of different ways that you can actually, contract out your site development. There is doing it the way of a general contractor, meaning your William A. Hazels, your American Infrastructures, your Total Development Solutions, where you have one shop that has all the parts and pieces to move, your clearing, erosion controls, moving your dirt, laying your pipe, all your utilities, stone, asphalt, and paving, all the way through the process where you have, one company that's responsible for all of it. And then there's another way of general contracting it yourself, where you hire your own clearing company, you hire your own excavation company, you hire your own, concrete company. You hire all the parts and pieces, and you effectively manage the entire process day to day yourself, which typically will cost you less money, but the risk is inherently more. Because if there's a problem on the site, when you've contracted out all the parts and pieces, everybody points at one another, and when it comes to who's responsible. When it comes down to general contracting, it lands on one company. So that's how their business model works. So, we have a series of project managers in our company that actually manage the stuff out in the field. Depending on how we've contracted, we'll determine exactly what they do, day to day. We hire, I know there's some folks here from ECS, while you're going through the development process, you're also, you have third-party engineers that are out conducting inspections to make sure that the work is being done correctly. They're inspecting how the soils are being compacted. You've got your civil engineer that's as-builting everything to make sure that the pipe and the utility manholes are all in the right place. You've got your environmental consultant that's coming out and doing your SWIP inspections to make sure that your stormwater management, stormwater pollution plan, your SWIP, is actually being, is actually being done, that all the things that could go wrong are being mitigated by the fact that you've got third parties that are checking to see what's going on day to day in the operation. So, that's, typically how we manage it. And, as you get closer to base paving, that's when you start delivering, your lots to your building group. So, we start turning over lots to, our building group as they get, the first lots are finished. They'll typically start a model early but you're timing the rest of the development where you're finishing your work just ahead of that building group starting building homes. So that's, typically how it goes from there, and then you just work through the project. Phase by phase by phase, developing as needed to stay ahead of your building group. Because at the end of the day, the acquisitions, engineering, and development groups are only there because we're trying to make lots for our home building group to build and sell. So, overall, that's pretty much it.
Right, nothing goes wrong, it's just smooth, just like George said, there's no hiccups, dynamic compaction, just, you do it every day, not a big deal.
It really comes down to how thorough you are on the front end will determine how successful you are on the back end. You can develop anything in Northern Virginia if you try hard enough and you have enough money. It's just about making sure that you don't buy something that is going to cost you vastly more to develop than you anticipated. Because that, at the end of the day, development is what it is, sticks and bricks are what they are. Your two variables are your house out sale pricing and your land purchase values. Those are your two biggest moving components. Everything else in the middle should be relatively stable.
So what we've heard, and permitting is another process that could take forever or can go quickly, has all sorts of variables that could help you or hurt you. So I'm not going to get into the detail on that, but just to summarize the process, we started talking about land acquisition and how important it is. And then we continued through the different components that go into how do we get land and how do we develop it to the point where we're ready to build homes. The next session we'll talk about the building homes part of it. But everything we talked about today is fraught with big dollars and big risk. And that's why builders look to hire people that have been in the business a long time, who are really smart maybe. Some of the people aren't so smart, but some of them are. And you don't have to be in it a long time, you have to want to learn. There's a lot of stuff to learn. We just went through everything, and it sounded real complicated, and we simplified it. We truly simplified it. Each piece that we talked about, we could have expanded by 10 times with the details that could get you in trouble. It's risk and reward. It's the simple stuff, risk and reward, that we're always looking at and trying to minimize our risk and maximize our reward. To minimize the risk, we've got to do a lot of work up front, getting our land and making sure we do it right, going through financial models, going through the approval process if we're not fortunate enough to get finished lots at a good price, which is fraught with risk. Going through all of that to come up with the end product is a very, very complex process that you all are involved in one way or another. We're involved from a higher level in all the aspects of it as builders. Just wanted to present this as we have to get a little understanding of it, and see if there's any other questions or comments.
Just as a closing, I wanted to find out if any of you or anyone in the room was either directly involved in or close enough to the development of Evans Restaurant and Farm property in McLean, when that took place, and what that was like in the NIMBY and the effort of the owners to get Fairfax to buy and continue it as a model.
Yeah, the Evans Farm site, so Elm Street bought it and took it through the entitlement process.
Okay.
And I think that it went through, it all started with the comprehensive plan. So big, large farm site in McLean, Fairfax County specifically talked about it in the comp plan, said it's approved for potential density of X to Y. You need to set aside open space, historic structures, la, 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 la. So I think that that's an instance where when you see something like an Evans Farm that's sitting there, go to the comp plan, and typically the jurisdiction's already written something specifically for that site. So, but that was a mix of detached singles and attached product. It's gated. So, you know, it was how it was presented by Elm Street and Craft Mark and Craft Star that got their approval. You know, what neighbors did it really affect? There were some single-family homes, some towns, you know, sits on 123, so church site across the street. So I think that really was the driver was the comp plan on that site.
And that's one of the things that, one of the many things, but it's a big thing that you look at first. Is the land you're looking at consistent with the county's comprehensive plan for the county? Does it fit in an area that?
Right, right. But there are a number, again, as George said, you know, it's the what's left. So you're constantly going to meet with your elected officials, your planning commission supervisors, using your attorneys and your engineers, all your consultants to leverage and to say, well, the comp plan needs to be changed. Again, the comp plan is amended every 5 years, but you can do out-of-term plan amendments if you convince the planning commissioner or supervisor within the district that, you know, this no longer is an office site. Everything's changed around it. It still says office in the comp plan. So, but supervisors are very reluctant to do out-of-term plan amendments, but there is a cycle within the jurisdictions that allow out-of-term plan amendments to happen in between the actual cycle for other approvals. Again, we're not going to get into it. The case study in here was an office building, and that's what you're seeing a lot of now is the redevelopment of office buildings, older shopping centers, schools, institutional uses. That's where you're unlocking value, and that's where the entitlement risk is greater, and that's where your relationship with your elected officials and leveraging your consultants is the greatest. That was a site that we had under contract, and we spent 3 years on the approval process to get Bethesda Muse, to get 29 singles and 5 MPDUs, and we tore down a 150,000 square foot office building. But the comp plan it was zoned R6, it was zoned for residential, so we had all that going for us.
3 years, so the whole process here could take, there's properties that take 5, 10 years. Ken Island, that K-Hubnanian has, been 15 years that they've owned the land, they bought it, with the idea of building an active adult community. The county supervisors were against it because all the residents around it didn't like the idea. So they wanted to get an amendment and a zoning approval, and they've been working, they're just about there now. Because the new government, all these things can affect your ability to be successful. Buying it early, and it's just raw land, is much riskier when you need zoning approval or a comp plan amendment. Much riskier than if you're buying finished lots from a developer that's already gotten all the approvals. You pay a lot more from that, but you get much less risk. Soup to nuts. It's a lot of areas.
Questions?
With that, Drew, can you just talk about the finished lots versus the raw groundwater stuff? Can you talk about your wholesale kind of?
So, yeah, so there's raw purchases and then there's finished lot purchases, but there's also a hybrid. And we do it with certain companies that want to develop and sell finished lots, but also would like to be taken out of the process sooner. And we've actually broken up some of our deals where we buy the property raw, but we actually pay the seller or his development company a fee to go ahead and do the finishing for us. So it actually limits our development risk because we know we have a contract for how much it's going to cost to actually get finished lots here. But we are taking on, the cash earlier in the process, and we'll buy it raw, put a couple hundred lots in the books, but then we'll pay for the development of those lots over the course of the next 3 years on a quarterly basis. And it's, again, in this market, you do whatever you need to do to find a deal. There's that, risk profile that individual companies have, both on the buyer and the seller side, and you just try and figure out a deal that works for both, depending on how creative you can be.
Other questions? Well, with that, I'd say thank you to everyone for coming. It was a pleasure to speak with you. If you have any questions, I don't know if afterwards, you can email one of us or write to MBDIA and they'll get to it.
Call in.
But understand Howard responsible.
I'm always.
Do you have a tentative idea when part 3 will be? Do you have a tentative idea when part 3 is gonna be?
Part 3, I'm guessing, will be in about 2 months. So we're looking at May.
We're in that.